February 14, 1912. Barcelona, Spain. Juan Pujol García entered the world as the third of 4 children born to Juan Pujol, owner of a cotton factory, and Mercedes García Guijarro from Andalusia. Nobody present at his birth could have predicted that this child would become the greatest double agent of World War II. Nobody imagined he would receive military decorations from both Adolf Hitler and King George VI. Nobody foresaw that his imagination, the same imagination that would doom his early business ventures, would save thousands of Allied lives on D-Day. At age 32, Juan Pujol would be a failed chicken farmer, a failed cinema owner, a failed hotel manager, and a man whose marriage was collapsing. He would have no intelligence training, no espionage connections, and no credentials. He would be living in fascist Madrid, surrounded by Nazi agents and informers. His chances of becoming a master spy were approximately 0. Within 18 months, he would be running a network of 27 agents that existed entirely in his imagination. The German High Command would trust him implicitly. They would pay him $340,000 to fund his fictitious spy ring. They would award him the Iron Cross, requiring Hitler's personal authorization. And they would never discover that every single word he told them was a lie. January 1941, Madrid, Spain. Juan Pujol García, 28 years old, walked into the British embassy with his young wife Araceli. He offered his services as a spy against Nazi Germany. The British intelligence officer looked at the short Spaniard with slicked-back dark hair and warm hazel eyes. A former chicken farmer. No military training beyond 6 months of compulsory service, no intelligence experience, no connections, no credentials. The officer's response was polite but firm. "Thank you, but we're not interested." Pujol returned 2 more times. Each time, the British rejected him. They suspected he might be a German plant. They had no use for eccentric Spanish civilians with grandiose ideas. They didn't understand that Pujol had developed an intense loathing for totalitarianism during the Spanish Civil War. They didn't know that his father had taught him to fight for freedom and individual dignity. They couldn't see that this unassuming man possessed one extraordinary weapon, an imagination so vivid it had nearly ruined his life. Pujol left the embassy for the 3rd time, rejected and dismissed. Most men would have abandoned the plan. Pujol decided to become a German spy first, then return to the British as a proven asset. What happened next would change the course of World War II. 1936, northern Barcelona. Juan Pujol García was managing a poultry farm when the Spanish Civil War erupted. His sister Elena's fiancé was taken by Republican forces and disappeared. His mother and sister were arrested and charged as counter-revolutionaries. Only intervention by a relative in a trade union saved them from execution. Pujol was called up for military service by the Republicans. He didn't report. Instead, he hid in his girlfriend's parents' home. He was arrested. He escaped. He crossed lines and joined Franco's nationalist forces, working as a signals operator. He deserted that post too, crossed back into Republican territory, was jailed, interrogated, and eventually released when the war ended. The experience marked him permanently. He watched both sides commit atrocities in the name of ideology. He saw fascists murder in the name of national purity. He witnessed communists execute in the name of revolutionary justice. He observed how political extremism poisoned everything it touched, destroying families, communities, and human dignity. His father's cotton factory was seized by workers during the war. The family's comfortable middle-class existence vanished overnight. Security, prosperity, normalcy, all were casualties of ideological warfare. Pujol emerged from the conflict with one unshakable conviction. He despised political extremism in all its forms. Fascism, Communism, totalitarianism of any variety, all were poison to human dignity. When Nazi Germany began its conquest of Europe, Pujol knew he had to act. He was no soldier. His brief military service had proven that. He lacked the essential qualities of loyalty, generosity, and honor required for military life by his own admission. But there was another way to fight: espionage. The problem was that nobody wanted his help. 1931, 7 years before World War II began, Juan Pujol had completed his compulsory 6 months of military service in Spain's 7th Regiment of Light Artillery. He hated every moment: the discipline, the hierarchy, the violence. He was a humanist, a dreamer, a pacifist. After leaving the military, he pursued various business ventures. He bought a series of movie theaters. They failed. He enrolled in an academy and became a certified poultry farmer. He managed a chicken farm. That failed too. He took a job as a hotel manager in Madrid. It was not the life he'd imagined. His father had died in 1931, shortly after the Spanish Republic's establishment, believing his son was a failure. His mother was in despair over his lack of direction. Pujol was adrift, stuck in dead-end jobs, haunted by the feeling that he was meant for something greater. When Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany in 1940, Pujol finally understood what that something was. He would become a spy. He would use the imagination that had cursed him in normal life. He would start a personal war with Adolf Hitler. Spring 1941, Madrid. After his third rejection by British intelligence, Juan Pujol García made a decision that seemed insane. If the British wouldn't accept him as a spy, he would become a German spy first. Then he would return to the British with credentials. He began studying fascist ideology, Nazi Germany's military structure, and Spanish political networks. He attended public gatherings where pro-Nazi sentiment was expressed. He cultivated the appearance of a committed fascist sympathizer. He studied how Spanish officials who collaborated with Germany spoke, dressed, and conducted themselves. He researched which Spanish government departments had regular contact with Britain. He created a false identity as a fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish government official who frequently traveled to London on business. The identity needed documentation. Pujol approached a printer and spun an elaborate story about working for the Spanish embassy in Lisbon. He needed diplomatic documents for official travel. The printer, impressed by Pujol's confidence and detailed knowledge of embassy procedures, agreed to help. The man created a fake Spanish diplomatic passport that appeared entirely authentic. Armed with this forged document, Pujol contacted Friedrich Knappe-Rate, an Abwehr agent in Madrid, codenamed Federico. Pujol told Federico he was a Spanish official with access to London through diplomatic channels. He claimed he wanted to serve the Third Reich. He expressed hatred for Britain and democracy. He offered to spy on Britain. The Abwehr investigated. They checked Pujol's background. They verified his passport. It appeared genuine. They assessed his motivation. It seemed credible. Everything checked out. Federico gave Pujol a crash course in espionage. Secret writing, invisible ink, cipher codes. He explained how to identify military installations, count troops, observe supply movements. He demonstrated techniques for avoiding surveillance. He provided $600 for expenses, a substantial sum in 1941. He gave him the codename Alaric and requested that his spy network be called Arabelle, short for Araceli Bella, Pujol's tribute to his wife who had helped him reach this point. His instructions were clear: travel to Britain, recruit agents, establish a spy network, send regular intelligence reports. The Abwehr expected results within weeks. July 1941. Pujol left Madrid with his pregnant wife Araceli, his destination, Britain. His actual location, Lisbon, Portugal. Pujol never intended to go to Britain. He was terrified of being arrested by British police as a German agent. He had no way to make contact with British intelligence once inside Britain. His fake passport might not withstand close examination at British immigration. Instead, he settled into the Hotel Palacio in Estoril, a resort town outside Lisbon, and began the greatest deception operation in espionage history. From the Lisbon Public Library, he gathered everything he could find about Britain. Tourist guides to England, Scotland, and Wales. Bradshaw's Railway Guide, with complete train schedules and routes. Reference books on British geography, climate, and culture. Current and back issues of British magazines and newspapers. Newsreel footage from local cinemas showing British cities and military activities. Blue Guide travel books with detailed descriptions of British landmarks, hotels, and restaurants. Using these sources, Pujol began fabricating intelligence reports that appeared to come from London. He studied British place names and military terminology. He memorized distances between cities. He learned British currency, measurements, and customs. He noted details about weather, seasonal patterns, and daily life. Then he began writing. His first reports described his arrival in London, his establishment of lodgings, and his initial observations of British life. He described blackout conditions, rationing restrictions, and public morale. He reported on British military movements based on newsreels. He identified supply convoys using shipping schedules from reference books. He described military installations using addresses from travel guides. The reports were detailed, plausible, and mostly wrong, but they were convincing enough. The Abwehr accepted them. Pujol's first major challenge came when he needed to expand his network. One man couldn't cover an entire country, so he invented Agent Number 1, a Dutch airline employee named Carvalho, willing to smuggle letters with invisible ink across neutral countries. Then Agent Number 2, a pilot in the Royal Air Force who was disaffected and willing to share information. Agent Number 3, a Venezuelan student studying in Glasgow who recruited 3 sub-agents of his own. Agent Number 4, a Gibraltarian waiter named Fred, who eavesdropped on diplomats at his restaurant. Each agent had a full backstory, personality quirks, and regional expertise. Agent 3 was temperamental and sometimes provided unreliable information. Agent 4 was cautious and only reported what he directly observed. The pilot, Agent 2, had gambling debts that motivated his betrayal. Carvalho, the Dutch courier, was motivated by anti-British sentiment from the Netherlands occupation. None of them existed, but their characterizations were so consistent and detailed that German intelligence analysts accepted them as real. Pujol's first letter to Frederico confirmed his arrival in London, though he remained safely in Lisbon. He described British military movements based on newsreels he'd watched at Lisbon cinemas. He reported on supply convoys using shipping schedules from reference books. He identified military installations using addresses from travel guides. The reports were detailed, plausible, and mostly wrong, but they were convincing enough. The Abwehr accepted them. Then Pujol made mistakes that should have exposed him. He reported that Glaswegians would do anything for a litre of wine, not realizing that Scotland's drink of choice was whiskey, and that wine was measured in bottles, not litres in Britain. He miscalculated currency conversions, confusing Portuguese escudos with British pounds. He made errors with the metric system versus imperial measurements. He once reported on a convoy sailing from Liverpool when those ships were actually docked in Portsmouth. Any competent analyst should have caught these errors. But Pujol had built in a brilliant protection mechanism. Whenever questioned about inaccuracies, he blamed his sub-agents. Agent 3 had been drinking when he filed that report. Agent 4 had misheard a conversation at his restaurant. The pilot had confused two different airfields. The Germans accepted these explanations. After all, human sources make mistakes. The overall quality of Alaric's network remained high despite occasional errors. And the Abwehr desperately needed intelligence from Britain. They chose to believe. By late 1941, British MI5 had intercepted Pujol's reports to Germany through signals intelligence. They were reading German communications about Arabelle and his network. One officer read the reports and demanded, "Who is this Arabelle and why is he so obviously lying?" The reports contained obvious errors that suggested the source wasn't actually in Britain. But another officer, Desmond Bristow of MI6's Iberian section, saw something different. The lies were detailed and consistent. The network seemed elaborate and well organized. The Germans were clearly treating Arabelle as a valued, trusted asset. If MI5 could identify and control this source, they could feed strategic disinformation to Berlin. They could use Arabelle's established credibility to mislead German intelligence. They could turn Germany's own spy network against them. But first, they needed to find out who Arabelle really was, and whether he was really a German agent who needed to be arrested, or something else entirely. December 1941. By the end of the year, MI5 had traced the letters to Lisbon. They determined that Arabelle was likely operating from Portugal, not Britain. This explained the errors in his reports, but it raised new questions. Why would a German agent claim to be in London while actually in Lisbon? Was this an elaborate deception? Was Arabelle actually a double agent? MI6's Lisbon station arranged a meeting at a café. Juan Pujol García sat across from Jean Risso-Gil, the MI6 officer sent to assess him. Pujol had been waiting for this moment. He explained everything. He'd approached British intelligence 3 times in Madrid and been rejected. He'd decided to establish credentials by becoming a German spy first. He'd never been to Britain. He'd created an entire spy network from a hotel room using library resources. He'd fooled the Abwehr into funding fictitious agents. He wanted to become a double agent for Britain. He wanted to fight Hitler the only way he knew how, through deception. Gil listened with growing astonishment. This unassuming Spanish chicken farmer had accomplished something unprecedented. He'd created a German intelligence network entirely through imagination. He'd convinced professional intelligence officers to pay for agents who didn't exist. He'd sustained the deception for months without training, without support, without any intelligence background. He'd done it all alone. Gil asked the obvious question, why? Pujol's answer was simple. I hate totalitarianism. I watched it destroy Spain. I won't watch it destroy Europe. Gil reported back to London. MI5 made a decision. They would bring Juan Pujol to London, not as a German spy to be interrogated, not as a suspicious foreign national to be monitored, as a British asset to be deployed against the Third Reich. April 1942, London, Juan Pujol García finally arrived in Britain. For real this time. He travelled by plane, leaving Araceli temporarily in Lisbon until arrangements could be made. He met Tomás Harris, a Spanish-speaking MI5 officer who would become his handler, collaborator, and friend. The partnership was extraordinary from the beginning. Harris, 33 years old, was half Spanish through his mother. He'd grown up between Spain and Britain, fluent in both languages and both cultures. He was an art dealer by profession, sophisticated, well-connected, and deeply intelligent. He had the intelligence training and operational discipline that Pujol lacked. Pujol had the imagination and improvisational genius that Harris admired. Together, they would expand Arabelle from a handful of fictitious agents into a network of 27 fully realized characters. MI5 gave Pujol the code name Garbo after actress Greta Garbo. The reasoning, his acting ability rivaled Hollywood's finest. His performance as a Nazi sympathizer had been so convincing that the Germans never doubted him. His creation of fictional agents was so detailed that they seemed real. He was the Greta Garbo of espionage, mysterious, compelling, utterly believable. Pujol and Araceli moved into a modest two-story house at 35 Crespigny Road in Hendon, North London. The house became both Pujol's home and his operational headquarters. Though the family later moved around the corner to 55 Elliott Road, Pujol continued working at 35 Crespigny Road. The house contained the wireless transmitter and its operator, Charles Haynes, who would send Pujol's messages to Madrid. From this suburban London address, Pujol and Harris began systematically manipulating German war strategy. Their working method was collaborative. Harris would brief Pujol on what strategic objectives MI5 wanted to achieve. Pujol would devise narratives that would lead the Germans toward those conclusions. Together, they would craft messages that mixed truth with fiction in carefully calculated ratios. Each of Pujol's 27 fictional agents had complete life stories that Harris and Pujol developed together. Agent number 1, the Dutch airline employee who smuggled letters and had connections across neutral countries. Agent number 2, a pilot in the RAF who provided technical details about aircraft and airfields. Agent number 3, a Venezuelan student in Glasgow who recruited 3 sub-agents. A Greek seaman, an Indian poet, and a British military officer. Agent number 4, Fred, the Gibraltarian waiter with access to diplomatic circles and loose lips lubricated by wine. Agent number 5, an American sergeant stationed in Britain, indiscreet and willing to share classified information for money. Agent number 6, a Welsh nationalist named Donny, who led a group of fascists called the Brothers of the Aryan World Order in Swansea. Agent number 7, Stanley, a soldier in the 9th Armoured Division who reported on unit movements and equipment. The network included businessmen, military personnel, dock workers, civil servants, and ordinary citizens, all positioned to observe British military activity, all completely imaginary. Pujol and Harris worked long hours crafting personalities, relationships, and histories for these fictional people. Agent 3's sub-agents sometimes disagreed with each other, creating realistic friction. Agent 4 occasionally got drunk and missed important observations. Agent 7 developed health problems that affected the quality of his reporting. These human touches made the network believable. Real intelligence networks have personnel problems, communication difficulties, and operational challenges. Garbo's network had all of these, because that's what German intelligence analysts expected to see. Pujol and Harris communicated with German intelligence through letters containing secret writing, and later through radio transmissions. The messages mixed accurate but non-essential information, chicken feed, approved by MI5, with deliberate disinformation designed to mislead German strategic planning. The ratio of truth to fiction declined over time. Early in the operation, 80% of Garbo's information was accurate. This established credibility. By 1943, Pujol was feeding the Germans nearly 100% fabrication. But because the foundation of trust had been established, the Germans believed every word. November 1942, Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, provided Pujol's first major test as a British double agent. His mission: warn the Germans about Allied convoy movements while ensuring the warning arrived too late to matter. The operation required precise timing. Too early, and the Germans might actually use the intelligence. Too late, and they might question why Garbo bothered reporting at all. Pujol's agent number 4 reported observing a massive convoy of warships and troopships leaving British ports, headed toward the Mediterranean. The report was accurate in every detail: ship types, convoy size, departure timing. Garbo composed the message carefully, documenting exactly what Agent 4 had observed. He sent it by airmail from London to his German handlers in Madrid. The postmark would prove he'd sent the intelligence well in advance of the invasion. But airmail from Britain to neutral Spain in 1942 was notoriously slow. Wartime restrictions, routing through multiple countries, security delays, all contributed to unpredictable delivery times. Pujol had calculated the timing precisely. The message reached Federico in Madrid just hours before the Allied landings began, far too late for German forces in North Africa to react effectively. But the postmark proved Garbo had sent the intelligence days earlier. To the Germans, this confirmed two critical things. First, Garbo's intelligence was accurate and valuable. Second, the limitations of communication meant even good intelligence sometimes arrived too late. This wasn't Garbo's fault. It was the reality of wartime communications. Federico sent an immediate message to Alaric. "We are sorry they arrived too late, but your last reports were magnificent." The message continued. "We wish to stress that your work is highly valued. Continue your excellent efforts." The Germans' trust in Garbo deepened significantly. They increased his monthly funding. They urged him to expand his network further. They provided additional invisible ink, cipher materials, and instructions for improving communication speed. They had no idea they were financing an elaborate fiction. And they had no idea that MI5 was carefully managing every word Garbo sent them. Throughout 1942 and 1943, Pujol and Harris sent thousands of messages. Between January 1944 and D-Day alone, they would send over 500 radio messages, sometimes more than 20 per day. Each message was carefully crafted to serve multiple purposes. First, maintain Garbo's credibility by including verifiable but non-essential facts. Second, gradually build towards strategic deceptions that would mislead German planning. Third, create opportunities for future deception by establishing patterns and expectations. The Germans expended enormous resources attempting to verify Garbo's reports and hunt down targets he identified. They chased convoys that didn't exist. They investigated supply depots that weren't there. They repositioned forces based on phantom threats. One of Garbo's reports caused the Germans to send destroyers hunting for a fictitious convoy in the Atlantic. The ships spent days searching, burning precious fuel, finding nothing. Rather than question Garbo's intelligence, the Germans concluded the convoy had changed course or been recalled. Another report led to German agents in neutral countries attempting to verify Garbo's information about British troop movements. These agents reported back that they couldn't confirm or deny Garbo's intelligence, which the Germans interpreted as confirmation that the information was classified and well protected. Pujol had become one of the most trusted sources in German intelligence, which made him the perfect weapon for the greatest military deception in history. January 1944. A message arrived from Garbo's German handlers in Madrid. "We believe the Allies are preparing a large-scale invasion of Europe. Keep us informed of all developments." They were correct. Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, was indeed being planned. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAF, had been working on invasion plans for over a year. General Dwight D. Eisenhower had been appointed Supreme Commander. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery was designated Commander of Ground Forces. Hundreds of thousands of troops were training across Britain. Landing craft were being massed at ports. Supply depots were being established. The invasion was coming. But exactly where and when remained the Allies' most closely guarded secrets. What the Germans didn't know was that Overlord included a massive deception component. Operation Bodyguard, the overall strategic deception plan. Within Bodyguard was Operation Fortitude, and within Fortitude was Fortitude South, the elaborate scheme to convince Germany that the invasion would strike at Pas de Calais, not Normandy. Juan Pujol García would play the leading role. Operation Fortitude had two parts designed to threaten multiple invasion points simultaneously. Fortitude North threatened an Allied invasion of Norway from Scotland, supported by Soviet forces from the east. This forced Germany to maintain 13 divisions in Norway, troops that couldn't be used elsewhere. The deception relied primarily on fake radio traffic, since German reconnaissance couldn't easily reach Scotland. Double agents Mutt and Jeff captured German spies turned by British intelligence, sent reports supporting the Norway threat. Fortitude South was far more ambitious and complex. It aimed to convince German high command that the main Allied invasion would strike at Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, 150 miles northeast of the actual landing site at Normandy. The deception required multiple elements working in perfect coordination. Physical deception, inflatable tanks, dummy aircraft, fake landing craft positioned in southeast England near Dover. Entire fake army camps were constructed with tents, vehicles, and apparent activity. Radio deception, false communications simulating a massive army group preparing to attack Calais. British and Canadian signals units transmitted thousands of fake messages daily. The radio traffic suggested detailed planning, supply movements, and command structures for a force that didn't exist. Tactical deception, real Allied bombing raids concentrated on Calais area targets more heavily than on Normandy. This suggested Calais was the primary objective. Double agent deception, convincing intelligence reports from trusted sources confirming the fake build-up. This was where Garbo became essential. The physical props and radio traffic created the appearance of a threat. But Garbo's reports would make the Germans believe it was real. Between January and June 1944, Pujol worked around the clock with Thomas Harris, crafting hundreds of messages that would paint a detailed picture of Allied preparations. His 27 fictional agents were perfectly positioned across Britain to observe and report. Agent 3 in Glasgow reported Scottish divisions preparing for Norway operations. Agent 7 in southern England observed massive troop concentrations near Dover. Agent 4 at his restaurant overheard American officers discussing FUSAG, the 1st U.S. Army Group. Agent 5, the indiscreet American sergeant, confirmed that General George S. Patton had been assigned to command FUSAG. They described troops massing in southeast England. They identified specific units, real units that existed, but whose locations were misreported. They reported seeing landing craft, supply depots, airfields, and training exercises. They noted increased security around Dover and the Straits of Dover. They mentioned overhearing conversations about beaches in the Calais area being studied. Every detail pointed toward Pas de Calais as the invasion target. Every detail was fabricated or deliberately misleading. FUSAG didn't exist. It was a phantom army created through props, radio traffic, and Garbo's reports. Patton had been assigned to FUSAG precisely because the Germans feared him as their most dangerous opponent. They would believe such an important commander would lead the main invasion. The real invasion force was training in southwestern England, far from where Garbo's agents were observing activity. The deception was so elaborate that workers across England had no idea they were participating. Construction crews built roads leading to fake camps. They constructed fake oil storage facilities near Dover. They assembled inflatable Sherman tanks that looked real from German reconnaissance aircraft. They created rubber landing craft that appeared genuine in aerial photographs. British and Canadian radio operators in Dover Castle's tunnels transmitted endless fake messages. They worked 8-hour shifts around the clock, sending coded communications they never understood. They didn't know they were simulating the radio traffic of an army that didn't exist. From German-occupied France, Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights photographed the build-up. They saw tanks, aircraft, landing craft, and military camps concentrated near Dover. German intelligence analyzed the photographs. Everything confirmed what Garbo was reporting. A massive invasion force was assembling opposite Calais. The pieces fit together perfectly, because that's exactly what the Allies intended. The London controlling section, responsible for strategic deception, had created a masterpiece. But the masterpiece required one final element to be truly convincing. It needed a trusted source to confirm what German reconnaissance suggested. It needed someone the Germans believed implicitly. It needed Agent Garbo. June 3, 1944, 3 days before D-Day. Garbo sent a message reporting that his agent number 7, the soldier in the 9th Armored Division, had noticed something unusual. His unit wasn't preparing to move. Strange, Garbo noted, given the obvious signs of an imminent invasion. British newspapers were filled with warnings about staying off beaches. Security had been heightened across southern England. Allied bombing of French targets had intensified, yet Agent 7's armoured division, stationed near Dover, remained in place. Garbo offered a speculation. Perhaps the invasion would be smaller than anticipated. Or perhaps it would occur somewhere other than where the main force was assembled. The message planted doubt without being obvious. It suggested that even Garbo, with his excellent network, couldn't be certain of every detail. This actually enhanced his credibility. Real intelligence is ambiguous, incomplete, sometimes contradictory. Garbo was presenting realistic intelligence assessment, not omniscient certainty. The Germans read the message and noted Garbo's uncertainty. They didn't realize that uncertainty was deliberate. June 5, 1944, the night before D-Day. Special arrangements had been made for German radio operators to listen for Garbo throughout the night. The cover story: a sub-agent was about to arrive with critical information. Garbo's operator would transmit when the information was ready. At 3:00 a.m., Garbo's operator, Charles Haynes, attempted transmission from 35 Crespigny Road. He sent the call sign repeatedly. No response from Madrid. 3:15 a.m. Still no response. 3:30 a.m. Nothing. For 5 hours, Haynes transmitted the call sign. For 5 hours, Madrid's operator didn't respond. Finally, at 8:00 a.m., Madrid came online. Apologies for delay, ready to receive. By then, Allied troops were hitting the Normandy beaches. The invasion had begun. Garbo was furious, or appeared to be. He sent a scathing message that Harris and Pujol had crafted carefully. "I cannot accept excuses or negligence. I have been without sleep for 24 hours, waiting to transmit critical intelligence. My agent risked everything to bring this information. You failed to receive it. Were it not for my ideals and my faith in the ultimate victory of Germany, I would abandon this work immediately. I demand an explanation and an assurance this will never happen again." The message was brilliant for several reasons. First, it established that Garbo had tried to warn the Germans before the invasion. Second, it demonstrated his commitment to Germany. He was angry because he cared about the German war effort. Third, it put the Germans on the defensive, making them apologize and reassure him. Fourth, it allowed Garbo to add genuine operational details to his delayed message. Details that were now hours old, but still confirmable. When Garbo finally transmitted his pre-invasion intelligence, It included accurate information about Allied troop movements, landing craft positions, and operational details. The Germans could verify that everything Garbo reported was accurate. It just arrived after the invasion had already begun. This wasn't Garbo's fault, it was Madrid's radio operator's failure. German intelligence sent an immediate apology. "We deeply regret the failure of our radio operator. Your dedication to the cause is noted and appreciated. Please continue your excellent work. Your intelligence remains invaluable." The delay, entirely beyond Garbo's control, had actually enhanced his credibility further. He'd tried to warn them, they'd failed to listen, and now they owed him an apology. Garbo had turned a potential exposure risk, sending late intelligence about D-Day, into a credibility boost. But the real deception was still to come. June 9, 1944, 3 days after D-Day. This was the critical moment that would determine whether the Normandy invasion succeeded or failed. Allied forces had established beachheads at 5 landing sites: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. But the beachheads were tenuous. German defenders were regrouping. Panzer divisions were beginning to move toward Normandy. If those armored reinforcements reached the beaches quickly, they could drive the Allies back into the sea. The invasion could still fail. Hitler and his generals were at their headquarters analyzing the situation. Was Normandy the main invasion, or was it a diversion to draw forces away from the real landing at Calais? German intelligence was divided. Some argued Normandy was too large to be a feint. Others insisted the Allies wouldn't attack at the most heavily fortified point, Calais, without creating a diversion first. Panzer divisions were already on the roads heading toward Normandy. Within days, they would reach the battlefield. Everything depended on what happened next. At this exact moment, Garbo sent the most important message of his life. The message was long, over 2,000 words. It was detailed, specific, and urgent. Garbo reported that his agents across southern England were observing continued build-up of Fusag forces. Agent 7 confirmed that his 9th Armoured Division still hadn't moved. It remained near Dover. Agent 3 reported seeing American divisions in Scotland preparing for operations. Agent 4 overheard American officers at his restaurant discussing the second wave and the main operation. Agent 5, the indiscreet American sergeant, had gotten drunk and revealed that Patton's army group was scheduled to launch within 2 weeks of the diversionary attack. Garbo analyzed this intelligence carefully. The pattern was clear. The Allies had landed at Normandy with units that were not part of Fusag. Fusag, Patton's million-man army group, remained in southeastern England. Conclusion: Normandy was a diversionary attack designed to draw German reserves away from Calais. The main invasion, the real invasion with the most powerful Allied forces, was still coming at Pas de Calais. The Germans must not weaken their defences at Calais by sending all their reinforcements to Normandy. That's exactly what the Allies wanted them to do. Garbo's message laid out the evidence systematically, professionally, convincingly. It read like a brilliant piece of intelligence analysis. Because that's exactly what it was designed to be. The message was transmitted to Madrid. Madrid forwarded it to Berlin. Senior analysts at Abwehr headquarters studied it. They cross-referenced it with other intelligence sources. They examined aerial reconnaissance photographs showing Fusag forces near Dover. They reviewed radio intercepts showing Fusag communications. Everything confirmed Garbo's assessment. The report was forwarded to OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, the German High Command. It reached the desk of officers advising Adolf Hitler. On June 10th, the report was shown to the Führer himself. Hitler read Garbo's analysis. He considered the evidence. He made his decision. The panzer divisions moving toward Normandy received new orders. Turn around. Return to defensive positions near Calais. Maintain readiness for the main Allied invasion. Do not commit all reserves to Normandy. The decision was based substantially on Garbo's intelligence. Hitler trusted Agent Alaric. The Spanish spy in London had proven his value repeatedly over 3 years. His intelligence had been consistently accurate. His analysis was sound. There was no reason to doubt him now. The panzer divisions turned around. 2 armoured divisions and 19 infantry divisions remained at Pas de Calais. Over 150,000 German troops stayed in positions defending against an invasion that would never come. They waited through June. They waited through July. They waited through August. The invasion at Calais never came, because it never existed. By the time Hitler realized Normandy was the real invasion, Allied forces had established an unbreakable beachhead. Reinforcements had landed. Supply lines had been established. The liberation of Europe had begun. One message from a Spanish chicken farmer had changed the course of the war. Historians would later estimate that Operation Fortitude, with Garbo at its center, saved between 10,000 and 20,000 Allied lives. By keeping German reinforcements away from Normandy for 7 crucial weeks, the deception gave Allied forces time to build overwhelming combat power. When German reserves finally reached Normandy in late July, they faced an Allied force too large to defeat. The opportunity to crush the invasion in its first days was gone. And it was gone because Adolf Hitler believed a lie told by Juan Pujol García. July 29, 1944, 6 weeks after D-Day. A message arrived from Berlin via Madrid. Juan Pujol García had been awarded the Iron Cross Second Class. The decoration was normally reserved for frontline combat soldiers. It required Adolf Hitler's personal authorization. The citation praised Alaric's extraordinary services to the German war effort, particularly his critical intelligence regarding the invasion of France. The Iron Cross was presented via radio. Garbo couldn't exactly travel to Berlin to receive it in person. Pujol accepted with appropriate gratitude. "I am deeply honored by this recognition. I remain committed to the final victory of Germany. My network continues to observe and report Allied activities." In his Hendon house, Pujol and Thomas Harris shared a quiet moment of satisfaction. They had fooled Hitler so completely that the Führer had personally decorated them. The man they were trying to defeat had given them his nation's military honor. The irony was almost too perfect. November 25, 1944. King George VI presented Juan Pujol García with the Member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE. The ceremony was conducted in complete secrecy. Pujol's cover had to be maintained. Sir David Petrie, Director General of MI5, made the presentation at MI5 headquarters. Only a handful of officers attended. No photographs were taken. No public announcement was made. Pujol was now one of the few people in history to receive military decorations from both sides in a war. The Germans had given him the Iron Cross, the British had given him the MBE, and neither side knew about the other decoration. The Germans still had no idea they'd been deceived. They continued to trust Alaric's intelligence through the end of the war. Even as Germany collapsed in early 1945, Garbo's network continued sending reports. The reports explained why Fusag never invaded at Calais. The Allies had been forced to commit those forces to Normandy because of unexpected German resistance. The Germans accepted this explanation. They never discovered the truth. Post-war analysis would reveal the full extent of Garbo's influence. During Operation Fortitude, 62 of Pujol's reports were included in OKW intelligence summaries, the highest level of German military intelligence. German High Command had based strategic decisions on information from a source that was completely controlled by the enemy. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied Forces, personally met with Thomas Harris after the war. He told Harris, "Your work with Mr. Pujol most probably amounts to the equivalent of a whole army division. You have saved a lot of lives." British spy Anthony Blunt, who worked in MI5 during the war, called Pujol's work the greatest double-cross operation of the war. Historian Roger Fleetwood Hesketh, who studied Operation Fortitude extensively, put it simply, "It couldn't have been done without him. It was Garbo's message which changed the course of the battle in Normandy." Sir John Masterman, who ran the double-cross system, wrote in his post-war report, "Garbo was the most highly developed example of the double-agent system. His influence on German intelligence assessments was profound and sustained." The numbers supported these assessments. Historians estimate that Operation Fortitude, with Garbo as its centerpiece, saved between 10,000 and 20,000 Allied lives by preventing German reinforcements from reaching Normandy during the critical first weeks. By keeping 2 German armored divisions and 19 infantry divisions at Pas-de-Calais for 7 weeks, the deception gave Allied forces time to establish and expand their beachhead without facing Germany's full defensive capabilities. The Allies had hoped the deception might buy them 2 weeks. 7 weeks exceeded their most optimistic projections. And it was all because Hitler trusted a Spanish spy who was lying to him every single day. The Spanish chicken farmer who couldn't hold a job had become the man who fooled Hitler twice. First, by convincing the Nazis he was their spy. Second, by convincing them Normandy was a diversion. Both deceptions were complete, both were sustained until the war ended. And Hitler never knew the truth. September 1944, a security scare nearly exposed Pujol as a British double agent. The scare came from an unexpected source. A captured German officer mentioned during interrogation that he'd heard rumors about a highly placed British mole in German intelligence. The rumor suggested someone in the Abwehr had been compromised. If the Germans began investigating their own intelligence networks, they might eventually examine Alaric's reports more carefully. MI5 decided Pujol should go to ground, disappear from active operations while maintaining his cover. Garbo sent a message to his German handlers explaining that British counterintelligence was becoming more aggressive. He needed to reduce his activities temporarily to avoid exposure. His network of agents would continue operating, but communications would be less frequent. The Germans accepted this explanation. They urged Garbo to prioritize his own safety. "Your value to the Reich is too great to risk exposure. Reduce operations as necessary." Throughout late 1944 and early 1945, Garbo's network continued providing misleading information to the Germans. But Pujol himself withdrew from direct daily operations. Thomas Harris and other MI5 officers managed the network using the characters and methods Pujol had established. The Germans never realized the change. May 8, 1945. Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended. Juan Pujol García had survived. But he faced a new danger: reprisals from surviving Nazis who might discover his betrayal. SS intelligence officers had been meticulous record keepers. If those records survived and fell into the wrong hands, Pujol's true role might be discovered. Former Nazis might seek revenge against the man who had fooled Hitler. With MI5's assistance, Pujol developed an elaborate exit strategy. He would disappear. Completely. Permanently. 1948. Pujol traveled to Angola, a Portuguese colony in Africa. He established temporary residence there under his real name. Then he contracted malaria, or appeared to. Actually, he faked the entire illness with MI5's help. Portuguese authorities issued a death certificate. Juan Pujol García, age 36, died of malaria in Angola on specific date in 1948. His body was reportedly buried in Angola. News of his death reached various intelligence networks through official Portuguese channels. MI5 noted his death in their files. The Germans, or former German intelligence officers who might have investigated him, believed he was dead. Juan Pujol García, the greatest double agent of World War II, was gone, except he wasn't. 1949. A man named Juan arrived in Lagunillas, Venezuela. He bore a strong resemblance to the deceased Juan Pujol García. That's because he was Juan Pujol García. He settled into a new life under a new identity. He divorced his first wife, Araceli. Their marriage hadn't survived the stress of wartime operations, the secrets, the fear, the constant deception. Araceli had lived for 4 years, never knowing whether her husband would be exposed and executed. She'd endured the birth of their children during wartime. She'd maintained cover stories and lied to neighbors. The marriage couldn't be salvaged. Pujol married Carmen Celia Alvarez, a local Venezuelan woman who knew nothing of his past. They had 3 children together: Maria Elena, Carlos Miguel, and Juan Carlos. Maria Elena would tragically die young in 1975 at age 20. Pujol opened a small bookstore and gift shop in Lagunillas. He lived quietly, unknown, anonymous. He sold books to local customers. He chatted with neighbors about ordinary things: weather, local politics, Venezuelan football. He never spoke of his wartime service. His neighbors had no idea that the friendly shopkeeper with the slight Spanish accent had fooled Adolf Hitler. They didn't know he'd received the Iron Cross. They didn't know about the MBE. They didn't know about the 27 fictional agents or Operation Fortitude, or the message that changed D-Day's outcome. He was just Juan, the bookstore owner. For 36 years, Juan Pujol García remained dead to the world. He attended his children's school events. He managed his small business. He grew older quietly, watching Venezuela change around him. He never contacted MI5. He never reached out to former colleagues. He kept his secret perfectly. Until 1984. British author Nigel West was researching World War II intelligence operations. West had written several books on espionage and intelligence history. He became fascinated by Agent Garbo and decided to find out what happened to him after the war. British records indicated Pujol had died in Angola in 1948, but West was skeptical. The death seemed suspiciously convenient. The location, Angola, was far from anywhere Pujol had connections. The timing, 1948, was when many intelligence officers were establishing new lives. West suspected the death had been faked. He began investigating. He traced Pujol's movements through Portuguese records, British intelligence files, and family connections. He discovered that Araceli, Pujol's first wife, had eventually settled in Spain with their children. He contacted the family. They confirmed that Juan was alive. He was in Venezuela. West traveled to Lagunillas with a camera crew. He found the bookstore. He walked inside. An elderly man, 72 years old, looked up from behind the counter. "Are you Juan Pujol García?" After 36 years of silence, Pujol paused. Then he answered, "Yes." West explained who he was and why he'd come. Pujol agreed to tell his story. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, he spoke about Operation Garbo, the fictional agents, the D-Day deception, and the message that fooled Hitler. June 1984, Juan Pujol García, now 72 years old, returned to London. He met with his former MI5 colleagues, those who were still alive. Tomás Harris had died in 1964 in a car accident in Mallorca. But other officers who'd worked with Garbo were still living. They organized a reunion. Pujol visited 35 Crespigny Road, the house where he'd orchestrated the greatest deception in espionage history. The house looked smaller than he remembered, more ordinary, just another suburban London home. But from that house, he'd changed the world. He gave interviews to British media, he appeared on television, he published his memoirs, Operation Garbo, the personal story of the most successful double agent of World War II. The world finally learned the full truth about the Spanish chicken farmer who had saved D-Day. Newspapers called him the spy who saved D-Day.